National Unity Day, and the center of the capital is on the verge of a state of emergency. 2 months of protests, at times violent. Now they have claimed lives.
Fierce fighting could flare again, so while urgent diplomacy fails to produce a political compromise, the dynamic here is getting more desperate.
This is the flashpoint right here. The potential for the partition. Watch it. Right here. Look at the crowd move. No.
An historic vote with strong passions and high turnout. The polling stations untrampled by violence, ballots clearly marked, so the world would see undeniably Crimea wants to rejoin Russia.
The unthinkable. The wreckage of Malaysian flight MH17 strewn across the remote farmland of eastern Ukraine. No known survivors, just an echo of their hopes and their plans, and a billowing horror hanging in the air.
The OECE monitors have opened one of the train carriages. The smell is overwhelming. Inside are nearly 200 bodies of victims of that plane crash.
But as these protests grow, China's concern is that Hong Kong's push for democracy will spread to the communist mainland, hence this crackdown.
The message is Hong Kong people love democracy. They believe democracy is good for Hong Kong and certainly good for China.
Bring back our girls. They've been demanding that for 2 weeks now, between the tears for nearly 300 girls between 16 and 18 years old, snatched from their school in Nigeria, reportedly sold as brides to militants for the equivalent of $13 each.
There can be few easier targets than a school full of children. And yet the Taliban militants who scaled its walls were heavily armed with guns, suicide bombs, and hate. The result was a bloodbath no child should ever see.
The Nobel Peace Prize for 2014 and Malala Yousafzai.
I was totally sure that I haven't won it. But then suddenly one of my teachers came to the class and she called me and she said, I have something important to tell you.
In the murderous pairing of Ebola versus Liberia, the virus seems to have kept the upper hand. Coping with it about catching up to it. The dead and ill still literally falling by the roadside in Monrovia. This is the admissions unit of the MSF Ebola Treatment Center in Monrovia.
Yes,
and mornings all start with this. Arriving by ambulance or brought by family, the sick wait to be assessed, admitted, tested. And yes, mothers and their children are among them.
But it's tough because we have deaths, more deaths than usual, family being apart, like the parents are dying and the child are alone, and then rejected by the community.
With all the search power and technology of 10 nations brought to bear, the updates remain the same 3 days after Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 vanished.
They have not found anything as of now.
The lack of any explanation or any real facts is torturing families of the passengers.
You can tell everyone's motivated.
It's been called the most challenging search in human history. It's also been dismissed as pointless and misdirected. Regardless, Australia has mobilized, committing itself to search this patch of ocean like it's never been searched before.
The underwater drone that spent 7 weeks combing the entire seabed near where the pings were heard has officially struck out.
The area can now be discounted as the final resting place for MH370.
Killings, bombings, fear in the streets, a sense of bloody deja vu is taking hold as the conflict between Israel and Hamas grows more dangerous tonight. An especially troubling situation since it's being fueled by rage over the kidnapping and killings of both Israeli and Palestinian teenagers.
By dusk tonight, the barrage of Israeli missiles is still lighting up Gaza. The onslaught of Palestinian rockets still heading for Israel.
It was the recent images of those terrified, starving families trapped on a mountain in Iraq by ISIS fighters that sparked U.S. airstrikes.
This is James Wright Foley.
And now, to see a British ISIS fighter murder an American journalist just ramps up the realization that ISIS's reach is global. Hard to empathize with those who murder, behead, and boast about it. But preventing this, the RCMP believe, will mean starting younger, earlier, to get to the vulnerable before they can't be helped or stopped.
The next time they saw me ripping up my passport.
I am a prisoner. That I cannot deny.
Before we ever saw the high-definition videos, before British journalist John Cantley was forced under duress to speak for ISIS, the Syrian city of Raqqa long lived its own horror as the hub of strict ISIS rule. Raqqa is now the prime target of US-led airstrikes in Syria. The US says its strikes along with its Arab allies are hurting, but it is early days in a campaign it says could last years.
My Canada doesn't leave all the heavy lifting to others.
High over the Iraqi desert yesterday, 2 Canadian CF-18s edge close to a big American jet, an aerial refueler. They are loaded with missiles on the first mission of Canada's battle against ISIS.
Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent served as a military firefighter, was stationed from British Columbia to Nova Scotia, and served on several Canadian warships around the world. His uniform was the very reason he was targeted that day outside a Service Canada office in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu. Vincent was helping a fellow soldier with administrative duties. A short time later, they were both run over. Vincent killed. The other unidentified man is still recovering from his injuries.
Sue Hannah, it's very upsetting down here right now. There are a group of people who are performing CPR on a gentleman at the War Memorial.
And he shot. I watched him shoot him. And he ran away.
The person who fired the shots, as you just heard from our witness, then ran towards Parliament Hill.
Your hands all the way down, all the way down!
Corporal Cirillo was shot in the chest with a rifle by a gunman who ran off. Bystanders and paramedics tried desperately to save him, but it was no good. Nathan Cirillo was just 24 years old.
A killer on the loose. Can there be a more terrifying reality? Moncton is in the grips of an unrelenting nightmare. People here transfixed by every move of a massive manhunt.
It just takes one guy to just go crazy.
Does it make you think about the line of duty that the RCMP do?
Oh, for sure. I saw one this morning. I said, thanks very much for taking care of us. For sure.
It was just after midnight when police caught the suspected gunman who had terrorized this small maritime city. Weapons were seized at the scene, but in the end, Justin Bourque was unarmed and did not resist arrest.
Constable de Gilbert, Constable Ross, Constable Larch. To your post, dismissed.
First, they sent down a yellow tubular underwater vehicle. It took sonar, basically mapping out what was down there, and it hit something, a physical object. It took a picture. Could it be? The searchers then sent down a remotely operated underwater vehicle with high-resolution cameras. The video they took convinced the scientists they had the wreck of one of the Franklin ships.
So I think we have a really important day in mapping together the history of our country.
Bro, we're counter-surveilling the guy, you know what I mean?
In the latest video, Rob Ford is in a restaurant speaking a pretty authentic, if somewhat slurred, Jamaican patois.
I said, bro, just cut some. No, man, no money, man. Cha!
If you're going to make those accusations of me being a criminal, there's not much sense in moving ahead.
Were you drinking last night?
Yes, I was.
You were drinking last night?
A little bit, yeah.
You are sweating a lot. Let me get you some tissues here.
No, we're good. We're good.
Do you mind if I dab you, Mr. Mayor?
Marijuana, heroin, crack, alcohol, the gamut.
You name it. Pretty well covered it.
This afternoon, doctors transferred Ford from the suburban hospital to Toronto's downtown Mount Sinai, which has a world-renowned center for digestive diseases.
It is a liposarcoma, but it is definitely a malignant tumor.
Pulled my hair, threw me in front of him, and started hitting me close fist in the side of my head.
Just held me up against the wall by my throat.
In his Facebook letter, Gomeshi says that an ex-lover and a freelance writer were bent on a campaign of false allegations and vengeance. He said the CBC was for months aware of the allegations involving a number of women, and that he recently voluntarily shared proof the relations were consensual. He was fired, he said, because CBC told him this type of behavior was unbecoming of a prominent host on the CBC.
What shifted for us was it became an issue not about somebody's private sex life, but about somebody inflicting injury on another human being.
Mr. Gomeshi will be pleading not guilty. We will address these allegations fully and directly in a courtroom.
Another young black man killed by a police officer. Another community in grief. And last night, that grief gave way to rage. Today would have been the 18-year-old's first day of college. For some reason, he got into a struggle with the police officer on Saturday and ended up in the back of a cruiser, where police say there was a fight for the officer's gun and that Brown assaulted the officer. Witnesses didn't see it that way.
He's running this way. He turns his body towards this way, hands in the air, being compliant. He gets shot in his face and chest.
By the time the tear gas was in the air, people were running through the streets. It certainly looked like a situation out of control. Maybe even a riot.
This is no longer a peaceful protest.
But there is fundamental disagreement about what happened first.
We just said hands up, don't shoot.
There are very few African American men in this country who haven't had the experience of being followed when they were shopping in a department store. That includes me.
They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson.
As he died, Garner managed to gasp the same phrase.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
But once again yesterday, a grand jury refused to indict. And now, across the country, Garner's last words have become a chant.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Protesters are staging die-ins, and another phrase is raging on social media.
Black Lives Matter!
Analysts say the drop will be felt acutely in provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan. Not only will there be job losses, but governments that rely on oil revenue to fund budgets will have to make cuts of their own. Outside of the oil-rich regions, the story is much different.
On the contrast, it's actually very positive for central Canada, for example, Ontario, which will benefit not only from lower energy prices, but will also benefit from a falling Canadian dollar that makes exports more competitive.
Ready or not, the World Cup has begun in Brazil. After so much money spent, $11 billion, Brazil has a lot to prove, starting with the opening ceremony, showcasing the Carnival spirit and color this country is known for.
Police have started firing tear gas at protesters who are boxed in streets just beyond here. They're trying to prevent them from getting to the stadium.
5 people were injured by rubber bullets and overwhelmed by tear gas.
To the top of the Olympic podium, a tremendous performance from Justine Dufour-Lapointe and her sister Chloe, right on her heels.
Well, she put the pressure on the Americans.
Just like that!
Scores! It's Poulin again! Canada wins gold in overtime!
Canada wins the battle! Canada wins! Canada wins!
I will try not to sing out of key. Oh, baby, how you down? Well, I'm dead in the
NHL President Clarence Campbell presents the Stanley Cup to Captain Jean Beliveau.
In his 20 years with the Montreal Canadiens, Beliveau was able to hoist the Stanley Cup 10 times. He was adored by fans across the country. He said that he learned to play the game as a child on overcrowded rinks in small-town Quebec, which taught him stick handling and how to use his long reach and strong arms to keep the puck away from other players and to outmaneuver goaltenders. He always felt the fan pressure to do even more.
After scoring 2 goals, and you could hear some people, well, you could have scored 3. And on some night I scored 3, you could have scored 4. So you have the feeling that whatever you do, it's not enough.
Paramedics rushed to Flaherty's Ottawa condo shortly before 12:30. There was nothing they could do. Flaherty apparently suffered a massive heart attack.
There's general agreement that the House will now suspend.
Question period was suspended, political rivalries forgotten, as MPs shared words of condolence. Astonished Conservative MPs then gathered in their caucus room, that sense of disbelief still heavy in the air. Prime Minister Harper confirmed the worst.
I learned a short while ago that our colleague, my partner and my friend, Jim Flaherty, has passed away suddenly today.
Just a gesture from those carrying on. His glasses on the desk of the show, once inseparable from the man.
With Knowlton Nash.
How many grown-ups declared on Twitter today that as kids they thought the National was named for Knowlton Nash?
Violence is as American as cherry pie.
Watch the stories then, really listen to the scripts. You get the sense they all handed out headaches to the bosses and loved that.
He'd connected with viewers precisely because he came across as very trustworthy, very genuine.
At the altar, the mark of a journalist to the end. Nash's ashes in a vintage video canister. He had requested that as his urn.
The 911 call came in just before noon Pacific time. Williams was found unconscious and not breathing at his home in Tiburon, California, north of San Francisco.
Thank you very much. I just want to say here's a souvenir from the show.
Farley Mowat loved Canada, wrote about it, and changed it.
The powers that be say, well, you can't preach and be a writer. I say,
Maybe when the sun go down in the evening. Maybe when the sun go down.
I think if you can't laugh at everything, you're in terrible trouble.
When you're not around, when all the fun is all over, and the liquor's all gone dry. Oh, baby, you get to
this year you may have passed away without even being aware of it.
Did I? In the evening, when the sun go down, when the sun go down.
I've always wanted to set a record not of length of service, but of quality of service.
In the evening, when the sun